Welcome everyone to the Distilled Spirits Council Ask the Expert webinar series. I am Ross Mulcairn, Director of Member Services and Business Development at the Distilled Spirits Council of the United States, who you might know as DISCUS. Our topic today is the future of alcohol marketing, engage shoppers in a changing economy, with our friends from Inmar Intelligence and Mark Anthony Brands. We are recording this webinar so that it will be available on the events page of the DISCUS website as well as our YouTube channel. For those of you who aren't familiar, DISCUS is the leading voice and advocate for our members and the distilled spirits industry overall. DISCUS provides a wealth of resources and services, including this webinar series that aims to educate and to share relevant trends, ideas, resources, discussions, and opportunities. All of these webinars are available at distilledspirits.org/events. You can go ahead and check out that link for future webinars we have coming up on brand valuation, a new liquor handbook, some data projects we've got going on, and all sorts of other wonderful resources and partners that we can work with. Now, with that housekeeping taken care of, I want to welcome our speakers today. First is David Pless, the RVP of Adult Beverage Incentives and Retail Expansion at Inmar Intelligence. David is a seasoned sales and marketing leader with over 10 years of experience specializing in adult beverage go-to-market strategy. He currently manages Inmar's incentives portfolio, leading a team of industry professionals. We also have Bill B.A., Senior Manager of Client Insights and Analytics at Inmar. Bill uncovers shopper behavior trends to help brands reach and engage the right consumers. With 20 plus years in consumer promotions, he brings deep expertise in what drives shopper decisions. As Senior Manager of Incentives and Loyalty Insights, he leads consumer research and analyzes coupon settlement data to reveal usage patterns and help brands drive more effective engagement. And then lastly, we have Sammy Lebow, our shopper marketing associate from Mark Anthony Brands. Sammy is a marketing associate in the shopper category at Mark Anthony Brands, where she leads coupon strategy and supports on-premise programming across a portfolio of beverage brands, including White Claw and Mike's Hard Lemonade. She holds a BBA in Business Honors and Marketing from the University of Texas at Austin and a Master's in Marketing from Northwestern. Passionate about driving meaningful consumer engagement, Sammy brings a curious mindset, collaborative energy, and a genuine enthusiasm for learning and growth in the dynamic alcohol space, which we are all here for, learning and growth in the dynamic alcohol space. Welcome, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you.
So for those of you who are new here, our experts and I will talk for about 35-40 minutes, and then we will take your questions throughout. You can use the Q&A feature enabled on your screen. We will take your questions throughout the course of the chat, and then we will save some time at the end of the chat just for our Q&A to work through. Next week, we will send out a link with this webinar recording to everyone who has registered, and you will see this event on DISCUS's website, on our YouTube page, and in the member portal for all of our DISCUS members. Now, Bill, why don't you go ahead and take it away?
All right, thank you so much. Just want to make sure you can hear me okay, and also, can you see the webinar? Can you see the deck?
Yes, sir.
Great. Okay, awesome. So we'll get started. So thank you so much. Thanks for having us. Thank you for everybody who's attending and listening in. We're excited. We've got some new data and some things to talk about today. So before we get rolling, here's a quick overview of what we're going to be talking about today. Hopefully you can see our agenda on the screen. So we're going to start with a brief high-level look at some current trends in shopper behavior, not just in the adult bev category, the adult beverage category, but how people are approaching the entire grocery shopping experience. And that's going to give us some context for what's going on in the market and with our shoppers overall in terms of what's motivating them and what they're thinking about when they go to make any type of a purchase in the grocery space and what's affecting alcohol more broadly. From there, we're going to take a look at today's adult beverage buyer. We're going to look at some new research that we've just done on adult beverage shopper behaviors and trends in this category, and talk about what marketers are up against and what we can actually do about it. And then finally, we'll finish with some real world examples and takeaways, especially from Sammy, to make this very actionable and real world to everyone. So one final note before we get going. I am going to be presenting for the next few minutes a number of data points and insights on research that we've done, but I don't want you to worry that this is just a big data dump and that's all you're going to get. This is absolutely going to be about strategy. We're going to talk about things like reducing wasted spend and driving more conversions and connecting with the right shoppers. So whether you're a supplier or a retailer, even if somehow you're just a consumer who snuck in here and wanted to listen in, this session should be about sharpening your playbook and learning some new things. So with that, let's get rolling. So we're going to start with what's going on with grocery shoppers is at a high level. Like I mentioned, if you're in marketing in the adult bev space, it's obviously tempting to want to just get right into the adult beverage and alcohol category specific data. But here's the thing. In many cases, our purchases in this space are part of the grocery cart. And right now, that cart is getting lighter, and it has been for a number of years. And so over the next few slides, what you're going to see is data from shopper surveys that we run every single quarter. That's actually one of my responsibilities and one of the things my team does. We talk to about 1,500 regular grocery shoppers every quarter. These are just regular grocery shoppers. They're not targeted based on having certain shopping behaviors or activities. They just have to have purchased in a grocery store or online within the last few days so that they remember what they've been doing. And we ask them all kinds of things about their opinions and their needs and their struggles when it comes to shopping. What they buy, where they buy it, why they chose to go to the store they went to, what decisions they might have made before the store and at the store and after they've left. And as you'll see, as we transition into the next slide, and it's probably not a big surprise, shouldn't be to anybody listening in, that consumers are stretched really thin. They're price conscious, they're desperate for savings, they're prioritizing needs over wants. And that's a really important distinction there, is needs over wants, because unless you're something like milk or bread or eggs, in terms of grocery shoppers, you're probably, you may find yourself in the wants column and not the needs column. So, it's our job to find ways to get those wants to still land in the grocery cart. So let's take a look at what shoppers are facing in the current climate, and then we'll transition from there into more adult bev specific data. So right off the bat, a nice stat here to get things started. Despite all of us living through inflation and high prices and things like that over the last few years, 92% of consumers are still very concerned. When we just talked to some shoppers in Q2, and this data just ran actually just right before this month, only 8% of people that we spoke to said they had no concerns about inflation or prices. It must be nice to be those people. Most people are still expecting prices to go up and for inflation to get worse. What's interesting is also 3/4 of shoppers say that current events and hot topics, keywords, tariffs, I can't ignore it, economic uncertainty and political conflict and all kinds of other things like that also affect their mindset and their behavior when they're thinking about grocery shopping and when they go to the store. And many believe that that will also continue to drive prices up. All this chaos and things that are happening are going to continue to drive prices up. So it's just going to get harder and harder. Additionally, 3/4, just about 78% of shoppers told us that they've had to reduce the quantity and the quality of items that they're purchasing so far this year. So this isn't just activity, where they've made these adjustments over the last few years as prices have been high. It's still happening. It's still happening regularly for most shoppers. So they're buying less than they want to buy, and they're not buying the level of quality that they want to buy in many situations. And so where that all nets out is that 64% of shoppers tell us they're going to need more incentives. They're going to need more support from brands and retailers to be able to afford the things that they want. And I want to be clear, that's not people just saying that they're going to start using these things, and start using coupons and incentives. Most shoppers are already doing that. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. But what that means is 64% are saying, I need more. You're already providing me savings. You're providing me discounts and incentives. It's not going to be enough as things continue to get worse. We need more help. They're looking to the brands. They're looking to the retailers to provide them. And this is not to scare anyone. It's not doom and gloom, but it's just help. It's important to set the stage of what's going on and show how shoppers are feeling and reacting. And what's important to really recognize as we talk through a lot of this is that many of these shoppers are saying they would prefer if they can find a way to save on the things that they want to buy rather than having to make cuts or buy alternatives to the things they want to buy. So there's hope, right? They still want the things that they want. They're not just saying we're done, we're going to cut it out, I can't afford it anymore. They're still trying to find ways to make it work. We'll explore that a bit more. So people are expecting things to get worse, right? And as a result, they're leaning very heavily on the tools and incentives and savings offered by brands and retailers, but they're also getting very much more intentional with their preparation before going to the store. And in fact, 2/3 of shoppers tell us they spend at least 30 minutes preparing to go grocery shopping. So the old days of writing down milk, bread, and eggs, honey, I'm going to the store, let's go. That doesn't really exist for many shoppers anymore. They're spending a lot of time. And in fact, many tell us they spend an hour, and some even spend 2 hours or more. I mean, imagine spending 2 hours trying to figure out what you're going to buy when you go to the store. That's a lot of planning. And a lot of that planning is happening digitally. So these people are planning, and they're doing price comparisons, and they're looking for savings, often on retailer websites, on retailer apps. And yes, they still make the traditional good old shopping list. About 80% tell us that they do so before they go grocery shopping. And that's important for marketers because 68% of people who make a list say that digital coupons, for example, are directly influencing what they add to that list. And why is that important? And I mentioned digital coupons. That we're very close to that in the space at Inmar that we work in, and we see a lot through the settlement business that we have and through the incentives business, and we see that digital coupons today represent more than 50% of all the incentives that are redeemed. Just a few years back, paper coupons still dominated the market, but today digital coupons are actually over 50% of all that are redeemed, of all the types of coupons that are out there. And it's also important because it means you've got an opportunity, right? If we get back to the list, you've got an opportunity to influence what shoppers put on that shopping list. And we know from prior studies that if you make it onto the list, there is a high likelihood that you're going to get purchased, or at least a product in your category. Somebody might not write down a specific type of beer, but they may write down beer, or they may write down your brand, but they're probably going to buy beer if it's on the list. So then you may be wondering though, well, how many people actually use coupons, right? Is this a big thing, or is it just a handful of, extremists and extreme couponers and all of that? Well, according to our most recent survey, 82% of shoppers, 82%, say that they've looked for grocery coupons and offers within just the last month alone. So it's the bulk of shoppers. They are looking for these things. This isn't just an activity among, real deal seekers. This is among the general population of shoppers. And those incentives don't just drive savings either. They influence loyalty, they influence trial. So it's not just a quick buck, that everybody's looking for that they're getting. It's also helping expand their purchases and relationship building. If you look at the stat on the lower left, when we asked, 54% of shoppers told us that digital incentives influence their loyalty to brands, and 43% say they inspire them to try new products. So it's helping change what they purchase. It's helping to make them more loyal. There's a lot going on. Now, obviously, a lot of that planning and decision making is happening before they go to the store, right? And people often think of incentives like coupons and rebates, some of those things to happen at home during the planning. But as you can see on the right, over half of shoppers told us recently that they've also made purchase decisions and changed their purchase decision at shelf because of clicking on a QR code that led them to a digital offer. And that's really key for in the adult beverage category. There's a lot of at shelf promotion that goes on, the traditional neck hangers on wine and liquor bottles, right? Or you have tear pads and you have instant redeemables and all kinds of things. Well, that's now heading down a digital path as well. And shoppers tell us they're just as interested in just scanning a code and being taken to an offer that they get when they check out. So a lot of these decisions are also influenced in the store. So a lot of this planning is happening between the home and the store. And what we're seeing is that marketers historically, have kind of run separate things like media, and then they run their promotions separately. But it's getting more and more critical that you bring those things together and talk to shoppers along the shopper journey and to influence them all along the way. So moving on, we're almost there. Before we get to the adult beverage specific data, I do have one more sort of warning to share with everybody, some more doom and gloom, although I'm not really a doom and gloom type person, so don't take it that way. But this stuff is happening broadly. It's important to understand it. We're seeing right now that 40% of consumers are still switching brands when they go to the store. This was an activity that picked up a lot when inflation spiked during COVID a number of years back. We saw that people switching to private label brands or less expensive brands went way up all of a sudden. And that hasn't really slowed down. We're still seeing 41% have said that they've done that on their past few shopping trips. They're trading down because of cost. But that's actually not the worst thing that's happening. We see that about a third of shoppers say that they've removed items from their cart on their most recent trip because it was just getting too expensive. So they had your product in the cart, they were ready to buy it, and at some point before they put it in the cart, or from the point they put in the cart to the point that they got to checkout, they decided, I can't afford all this stuff. I've got to take things out. And unfortunately, if we look among food and beverage products that people removed from their cart, alcohol was the third on the list. About a quarter of shoppers who removed items from their cart. So they moved an adult beverage product from the cart. So we're not immune to this type of activity. And it really shows this is becoming a value-driven environment. And it's tough. And so the challenge becomes, how do we stay in the cart when every single item is being questioned across the board, except for maybe your milk, eggs, and bread, like we said before. And we'll show you some of those strategies. We're getting there. But first, before we do that, let's hop in and transition now to some newer adult beverage data that we've just recently put together, kind of show you what we're seeing in your category. So I mentioned that we do surveys, and we just ran one just a few weeks ago on adult beverage, talking to about 1,100 current adult beverage shoppers. And then we also talked to a few hundred people who have purchased previously but stopped for one reason or another, and even a few who have never purchased in the space. But we mostly focused on current buyers. And to look at and ask similar questions and things like we've just been showing you as to what they're doing and what's going on. And you'll see some very similar type trends. It doesn't change all that much as we move into this category, things like reduced frequency, lower basket sizes, and all kinds of things. So let's get into it. And so here we go again right away with some doom and gloom type things. What shoppers are telling us right now is, because of high prices, when we ask them, what are you doing today in comparison to, say, a year ago or just a few years ago in the space, a third tell us they're spending a lot more time comparing prices, right? So they're not just going out and buying the brand that they want to buy or what they're used to. They're looking around to see what's on deal. Can I get a better price? A third of shoppers are doing this fairly regularly. A third are also buying less often. So their number of occasions are less. And then on those occasions, when they do buy, 32% are buying less each trip. I'm sure you guys are familiar with some of these stats already from your own research, but we found it interesting. And what's also interesting is, I know the Gen Z audience is a key target for this space. And they're actually over-indexing on some of these things, as high as 40%, saying they're buying less per trip. And they're also spending more time. So they're not immune to these pressures either. This isn't just older shoppers or experienced shoppers who are being really smart. It's everybody. And, that's where it gets even more, and where it gets more real, for this category is that, like we were talking about before, needs and wants. Alcohol isn't essential for many shoppers. It's an elective, or it's a want versus a need. And that means we've got to work harder to justify that spend. And again, not news. This is probably not news for many of you, but it's obviously important framing. But regardless, for our consumers who don't simply want to buy less or buy less frequency, what steps are they taking as they go to the store? So on the left, we ask people, what do you typically do when you're deciding which adult beverage to purchase? And here are some of the things that they told us, some of the ones that stood out. We've got, about a third saying they look for digital coupons, about a third looking at the store circular where they're going to shop to see if there's deals, also just as many comparing prices, and then also others looking for rebates and paper coupons and other types of incentives. And it's also important to understand that these things change based on age. So if we filter just to Gen Z, looking for digital coupons goes up a bit, more so than some of the other ages. On the flip side, if I look at older shoppers like boomers, right, or even some of Gen X, comparing prices goes up and inches up higher than the others. So it varies based on the age. But, looking for different ways to save, such as digital coupons and rebates and coupons, is high on the list. And speaking of digital coupons, over 40% of adult beverage shoppers have used digital coupons to save on their purchases so far this year. And that's behavior we've seen reflected in grocery as a whole, and it's prevalent here. And now, if you're sitting there, if you're somebody who watches and are writing down all these numbers, and you might be saying, well, wait, it's only 43%, but just a couple of slides back, you said 80% are actively looking for coupons and things like that. So important to understand here. Sorry, I'm talking about people who've actually used, found, and redeemed a coupon. The other slide was talking about people who are actively looking. And the other thing to understand is that, broadly, other categories of coupons are going to be more regularly available to shoppers, right? So your cereals and your pasta sauces and things like that, shoppers are probably seeing those more frequently than they'll find coupons for beer or wine in that space. So, that's a much broader category. And in addition, there's obviously, and you guys know this better than I will, is there's strict rules about what you can do and where you can do it, right? So we don't have coupon laws by state that say you can't offer coupons on Fruity Pebbles in Texas, but you may not be able to offer a digital coupon in certain places. So it's not as broadly available. So all of that being said, looking through that lens, I think 43% is actually quite significant. And among those shoppers who do find those incentives and help them make those purchases, nearly half say they've also changed their purchase decisions based on that. And what does that mean? It's 47% and 54% of Gen Z, meaning they did something different than they might have done otherwise. It doesn't just necessarily mean they were going to buy this particular brand and bottle of wine, and they bought that particular brand and bottle of wine, and they saved a couple of dollars on it or $5. It means maybe they did something a little different. 46% tell us that they purchased more, right? So instead of buying one bottle that maybe was their intent because of an offer, maybe that required them to buy two, they bought two, or they bought two anyway, even if they didn't have to, or maybe they bought a larger size than they had normally planned. 39% said they tried a product or brand for the first time. So these things are driving trial. On the flip side of that, 29% said they switched from their preferred brand to a different brand. So if you were the preferred brand, that's not great, right? But if you were this other brand, then that's great. You've gotten somebody to come over and try your product instead of another one. So there's a lot. It's not just subsidization all the time, which is what a lot of people believe. There's other things happening behind the scene. And the takeaway is that these incentives working for the adult beverage space, they work exceptionally well. And they can do important things. I mean, for example, if you can inspire trial with an offer, you might gain a customer for life. You may get somebody to switch over and fall in love with your brand or try you instead. So it does a lot to drive a whole lot of behaviors. So rolling on here, I've just got a couple of more, and then we're going to open it up to David and Sammy as well. But so we've talked about price sensitivity. We've talked about value shopping, but here's where it gets even more interesting. Trial behaviors are high, especially among younger shoppers. And actually 30% of all adult beverage buyers told us they've tried a new product recently. And for Gen Z and millennials, it's even higher. So there is trial going on. Despite people trying to cut costs and save and other things, there's still trial happening. There's still switching and all kinds of things. And incentives really do play a major role in driving that. And importantly, and this is something that was interesting to me, because in the work I do in other categories, I don't hear about this as much, but we're seeing that the perception of couponing is not viewed as cheap or out of character with premium brands. I mean, David, you've got more experience here talking to adult beverage brands than I do on this, but I thought this was a really interesting finding, that it's not cheapening, the brand.
Yeah, Bill, thanks for bringing that up. I think that there's the big opportunity to really parse apart the impact of incentives as being incremental to your branding efforts. So this is one of those insights that really flips the old assumptions on its head. For years, the thinking has always been if you're a premium, vodka brand, or if you're a craft brand, couponing might make you look a little bit more commoditized, maybe even like a little bit desperate. But for consumers, especially younger ones, that really doesn't seem to be the way anymore. In fact, among Gen Z, over half said that coupons improve their perception of premium brands, which I found was really interesting. I think they're seeing it really as a gesture of like accessibility, not a dilution of value of the product itself. And that really says a lot about how the audience wants to be invited in, not just really upsold. So I think what it tells us is that if your product is delivering, the offer isn't going to cheapen it. It's actually going to accelerate trial. The first incentive can be really the beginning of a long-term loyalty with that individual consumer. And in a category where attention is just so fragmented, where baskets are shrinking, I think that's a really powerful opportunity for brands to activate on. So Sammy, I'd really love your perspective here though. So how have you been using incentives with some of your higher priced products? What have been your observations on consumer impact versus brand perception for the portfolio?
Yeah, thanks, David. We're often navigating the balance between protecting the premium equity of our brands while also wanting to drive trial. And this is especially present with some of our more elevated offerings. So whether it's Dillon's, which is our premium spirit-based RTD, or White Claw, which is widely distributed but carries strong lifestyle positioning and cultural relevance. With Dillon's, as a smaller brand, the focus is really on reducing barriers to entry. And as a more premium RTD, trial can be a hurdle. So we look to incentives that invite first-time purchase without relying on broad discounting. And this allows consumers to experience the quality firsthand, which increases the likelihood of repeat purchase while preserving the more elevated positioning. For White Claw, our approach is a little different. So we found success with incentives that are tied to key occasions. So think Memorial Day or Labor Day, where demand is high and consumers are actively seeking out beverages for social consumption. Cross merch has also been effective in aligning the brand with lifestyle occasions. And incentives can also be great to support innovations like Claw Tales or Zero Proof, or to drive display and visibility at the shelf. So it's never about price alone. We approach every offer with intention to ensure that it adds value to the shopper experience while keeping our premium positioning intact.
Thanks, Sadie. That's super interesting. Okay, I have to bring up something that you said there. You talked a little bit about
Sure.
cross merch, and all from the suppliers I've spoken to for a long time, just living in the digital incentives world, cross merch drives fewer redemptions than just a straight dollars off item. But it's really a value to the retailer, from a kind of the ability to give them something incremental that expands basket sizes. So I'm curious, like, how are you measuring cross merch programs? How are you measuring the impact of those programs overall?
Yeah, great question. And I think the main goal when it comes to cross merch is to align our brands with key occasions in the mind of shoppers. So let's say we're approaching the 4th of July, we might see an offer for White Claw and hot dogs. Naturally, because we're asking consumers to buy more, we'll see redemptions decline, but this helps to establish that connection to a key occasion. And like you said, it builds baskets, which is appealing to retailers. We've really found that cross merch offers are the most effective when the products are genuinely complementary and are relevant to the consumer's needs. So that's something we keep in mind when we do these offers.
Oop. Sorry about that. I hit the wrong direction. So I love the dialogue between you guys. So I'm gonna just finish up here with one slide quickly, and then let you guys take it from here. So I've talked about savings and trial, and we've talked about cuts and reductions. But how and when are these decisions being made? And there's some interesting stuff that we found here. The answer is that the intent is often formed early with adult beverage purchases and the mindset when going to the store, but the decision is shaped along the way and often solidified right in the final moments. And here's what I mean. So over 3/4 of consumers make a list before shopping. We talked about that before, but the add-on to that is that 82% of adult beverage buyers say they do put this category on their shopping list when they need to purchase, when they're in the need for that product, whatever variety it is that they buy. However, they don't always write down a brand, right? They may just put down beer or wine or vodka or whiskey or whatever it is. And even if they do write down a brand, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to buy it. So 59% of shoppers tell us they're going to decide that they want to buy an adult beverage product before they head to the store. So they're thinking about it before they go. They know they want to buy it. It's not an impulse for a lot of shoppers, right? But more importantly, nearly 60% say that they won't decide the actual brand or the specific variety or size until they're in the store, and often right at shelf. And what that means, though, is that there's plenty of opportunities to inspire this purchase across the shopper journey, and those final moments, of course, may be most critical. So it's important to find ways to influence a shopper to decide what to put, to put adult beverages on their list in the first place, but then to also encourage them to lock in their decision at the end. So as a marketer, you might offer digital coupons or other types of digital media and things like that at home to show shoppers that your brand is on sale, or to make them think of your particular brand and grab their attention, right? While they're planning, you want to inspire them to go look for you in the store. And then maybe you use things like digital scannable incentives at point of sale, which can be a coupon or a rebate or something at shelf to grab those people who haven't yet made up their mind. There's a lot of ways you can go about this, of course. But I don't want to steal too much from that, because I think David and Sammy are going to get a lot more into this. So with that, I will end this monologue that I've been on. I hope I've provided you guys with some useful stats or information, and I will promise now I will shut up and hand it over to David and Sammy, and you guys can take it from here.
Thanks, Bill. Appreciate that. Obviously, I'm loving the content a lot, so please don't shut up. For those on the call, what Bill really walked us through, I think, captures this tension between early intent and the last minute influence for the shopper at shelf. What we're seeing here is that while intent forms early, putting the spirit on your shopping list, the decision really isn't locked in until the very end when they're actually at the shelf. Shoppers are planning ahead, they're making lists, they're checking prices, but the brand decisions are really coming down to that last mile, that moment at the shelf for them in their day. And it kind of makes me think about, my own way that I'm making my list right now. So I know that maybe I want to make an old fashioned, or I'm making cocktails tonight. Right now, I'm writing that down on the list as probably like cocktails. But then when I'm going into some of the retail apps, I'm actually doing the pre-shopping where, I'm adding the bourbon and I'm adding the incremental items that I need to kind of round out the cocktail that I'm making. And that's when the brand decision takes place for me. But The opportunity here, I think, is that when there's an incentive attached, or if there is positioning from your marketing messaging attached at that point of intent where they're actually writing it down, but then again reinforcing it when they're actually making the decision in the moment, that's what can really help them in terms of choosing your brand over others. So I think that's where the strategy matters. You know, you really just want to show up before they shop and when they shop, whether it's a digital coupon or a neck hanger at shelf. Your media and promotions really need to touch the consumer each of the different points of their day. But Sammy, I'd really like your take on this. What kind of pre-shopping behaviors are you seeing from some of your consumers? How are you meeting them at the point of decision?
Yeah, we're seeing a clear shift in consumer behavior, exactly what you both alluded to. Shoppers are not just making decisions at the shelf, they are always in the shopper mindset. So they're influenced by multiple touch points before they ever enter a store. To meet them at the point of decision, we want to take an omni-channel approach that ensures consistent brand messaging across our media, e-commerce, and in-store so that we're staying top of mind. We lean into occasion-based pre-shop content to tailor messaging to the season, the setting, or even the consumer's mood to align our creative with the shopper's mindset in that moment. And then we reinforce that message through contextually relevant displays and signage in store, creating a seamless transition from digital to physical. This drives conversion at the shelf, especially when it's paired with targeted incentives. So it's all about being a part of the consumer's consideration set early and staying there through a connected experience.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Sammy, for the additional color. And Bill, thank you so much for talking us through, you know, what you're seeing from the data right now within this this fragment and ever-evolving landscape. It's clear that the landscape has changed quite a bit, especially in recent years. And I don't just think about the fluctuations around forecasting and supply chain issues in COVID, but now with shoppers and their desire to look for different alternatives. People are being more selective, their decisions and journeys are getting a little bit more fragmented, and it just kind of seems overall like consumers are more conscious of value. But I don't believe that they're unreachable. I don't know, Sammy, if you think they're unreachable. I think, in fact, they're actually giving us just different signals, and we have to know how to respond to them, you know, as marketers. So the next stage of this is that we'd really like to talk to you. What does this actually mean for you as a spirits marketer? And we'll look at 3 different areas that we're seeing both challenges, but of course, challenges always create opportunities. Looking forward to getting into it. So let's start with one of the biggest shifts that we're seeing. And I think it's something that everybody in the call is probably pretty well aware of: moderation and elimination. And if for us and what we're kind of finding right now, it's especially for health reasons. So 32% of current buyers say that they were cutting back on alcohol for health-related reasons, which I think kind of changes the script on times past, where it was really more about counting calories, weight loss, etc. Among the people who stopped buying entirely, it jumps to 46%. But what's considered health really depends on who you're talking to. For Gen Z, they're really focused on mental health. It was one of the biggest things that continued to pop up in the data that we looked at. For millennials like myself, we're thinking about fitness and weight management. And then older generations, Gen X, Boomers, Silent Generation, are really thinking about sugar, calories, and long-term wellness. So you kind of see these 3 different need states across the demographics that you're trying to access. And I know there's always been a question about, you know, how do we get our marketing messaging in front of Gen Z, because they're going to be our buyer now and hopefully for a lifetime. One of the things, though, is for whatever the reasoning is for, you know, these different focuses, these generations are cutting back. However, 65% of our respondents who said that they stopped buying alcohol said that they might return. So it doesn't mean that that's a door that's closed. It's one that's still cracked open. And it's not necessarily that we're losing shoppers, but my take really here is that I think that we're temporarily misaligned with their needs and trying to catch up to how this landscape is evolving. That's where smart messaging, inclusive branding, and cross-portfolio thinking really come into play. So how do we respond? To me, I think the answer is flexibility and inclusion. Start by surfacing the full range of your portfolio. If you have low ABV or zero-proof products, don't just silo them away. Spotlight them together with your full-strength lineup. You want consumers to see that you have something for every mood, moment, or lifestyle shift. And alongside that, with your full-strength products, make sure that you're showcasing them in ways that different consumers would consume them throughout the week, in terms of the cocktail recipes that may be relevant or the day parts that might be relevant. So second, where this messaging becomes more than product, your brand can really be a social connector, not just a beverage. And I think that's something the industry has understood for a long time. We know that adult beverages really tend to align with social experiences. They align with shared interests like community building, sports. So lean into that. Whether someone's drinking or not, you want them to feel welcome in the experience, and you want your brand to be a supporter of that. And then finally, re-engaging the lapsed drinker thoughtfully. For many of these individuals, we know that they're not gone forever. If you're using digital media retailer incentives, lean into signals like occasional buyer or used to buy or hasn't purchased in the last 26 weeks for those that you know are consuming and may have a higher propensity to come back. And build your campaigns around those contextual signals. The key is to make the return feel easy, make it feel familiar and personal so that you can align more so with their current need state. Sammy, I know Mark Anthony has been really great about doing it in this manner. I'd be really curious to see, like, can you tell us about how you've approached the moderation and elimination trend with flexibility and inclusion and how you're integrating into your advertising and incentives with a variety of different options? What's resonating? What's fragmenting?
Yeah, definitely. And at Mark Anthony Brands, we've built a portfolio that meets consumers wherever they are, whether they're choosing not to drink, looking for something a little more sessionable, or wanting a higher ABV option. And I think White Claw is a really great example of this. So we now offer White Claw Zero Proof for sober curious or wellness focused consumers. We still have our original hard seltzer for those who want something light and refreshing. We have Claw Tales, which rolled out in March for more flavorful and cocktail-inspired moments, and Surge for a higher ABV option and higher tempo moments. So it's all about giving consumers choice based on setting while staying within the same brand umbrella. From a messaging standpoint, we tailor communications based on context. So Zero Proof might show up in the wellness content or daytime occasions like playing pickleball, while Claw Tales and Surge might be featured more in elevated or late night settings. But the tone and look, they stay consistent. So no matter which product consumers choose, they're still a part of the same brand world. And we also focus on what unites these products: flavor, refreshment, and social connection, like you said, David. That way, whether somebody grabs a Zero Proof in dry January or a Surge on a night out, they're still having a White Claw experience. The idea is flexibility of product, but consistency in identity.
Yeah, thank you so much for going into that, Sammy. I really love the way that Mobby is approaching all of this. And I think you really set up our next conversation about messaging quite nicely. So let's go ahead and transition over. So let's talk about the second challenge. We're not always talking to the right people, and often we're talking too much. I think the old adage, and I got this from one of my colleagues at Inmar, is that in the past, advertisers were serving advertisements to legal drinking age audiences if they had a mouth, and that was kind of the whole impact of 50% of my marketing works. I'm just not sure which ones. That's being flipped on their head. So 83% of non-purchasers, and that includes both lapsed and never buyers, are still being served alcohol ads. And of those, 85% are saying that the ads do not influence them at all. This seems to be a really big red flag for both waste and inefficiency. And what's worse, the frequency fatigue is real. You know, it's that ad that continues to show up time over time, even though you're not interacting with it. Ads that show up occasionally might spark some curiosity, but ads that show up constantly, they push people away, especially with Gen Z, where the tone and the timing matters a lot more than we see with some of our different generations. So this isn't just about wasted impressions or wasted opportunities. It's about wasted opportunity, because there's another group that we really should be talking to: the lapsed, light, or new to category shoppers who are open to being pulled into this messaging. And I think that's an opportunity to target each of your brand's firepower. So to fix this, we've got to tighten up who we're talking to and how often. That means using past purchase data to focus on what I call the maybe crowd, people who have bought before, maybe just once, maybe a while ago. That's a much more productive group than those who have never purchased at all. Second, your incentives. So things like cashback, load to cart offers, scan downs, TPRs should go to that maybe audience too. Not everybody necessarily needs to see them, and not everybody honestly should. Third, let's be honest about frequency. We've all seen what happens when ads hit too hard too often. Consumers tune out, especially the younger generations. But If you're able to elongate the cadence of your frequency and really dial in your relevance, you can earn attention instead of burning that attention. So, Sammy, how are you navigating some of these challenges at Mark Anthony Brands?
Yeah, thanks, David. Relevant messaging is incredibly important, especially in an environment where media dollars need to work harder than ever to cut through the noise. So we approach our media strategy with clear objectives at each stage of the funnel to ensure that we're reaching the right consumers with the right message at the right time. So upper funnel tactics like out of home, national sponsorships, and broad ads, they're designed to build brand awareness and equity, but they're not intended to drive immediate purchase behavior. Mid and lower funnel media are where we get more targeted. We focus on shoppers who are closer to making a decision and delivering messaging for trial and conversion. And that's where we take a greater emphasis on audience segmentation, contextual relevance, and the shopper mindset. So yes, reach without relevance is definitely noise. And that's why we're constantly refining how we activate across channels so that each tactic plays its part in the broader ecosystem and does so with precision and purpose.
Yeah, I think that's smart. That's perfectly tailored to today's environment. I really like the concept of what you're talking about, that there's this adult beverage shopper journey, that they're going through and interacting with each of your products. You're really trying to move right with the consumer instead of force feeding them impressions or force feeding them incentives and something that may or may not get them to buy. I think it actually gets us talking about our third challenge and opportunity. So, today's shoppers are highly flexible in what they drink, where they drink it, and when. About 60% say their beverage choice is dependent on the occasion. Half of shoppers say that they drink differently at home versus the bar, and almost 61% say that their consumption changes with seasons and with holidays, which I think kind of makes sense. But what does that mean for the marketers? We need to flex with them. The same product can play a different role depending on the day part, the setting, even the channel. And that means that we have to stop thinking about all of the SKUs that are within your portfolio in silos. If you've got a lineup that spans formats or ABV ranges, let it work together. Show how your brand can move from the casual backyard barbecue to the upscale dinner to the sober curious wellness night in your advertising, and help it feel seamless in all three of those different occasions. For an example of how this plays out practically, first, align your product messaging to the real calendar. So thinking of like tentpole seasonal moments, think about weekdays versus weekends for frequency, and think about big life rituals in those areas that you're currently serving where people are making emotional buying decisions, because it still is emotional. Second, lean into multi-SKU storytelling. You don't need to show everything at once, but if you do have a diverse portfolio, create campaigns that demonstrate how each product fits into a broader lifestyle. That's especially impactful for millennial and Gen Z drinkers who are constantly shifting between ABVs, formats, and occasions. And finally, make your media work harder. Adjust your message by channel, day part, even mindset. A Sunday morning scroll when your shopper is, laying in bed is definitely not the same as the frantic Friday happy hour search. So the more responsive your placements are, the more relevant your brand will feel. But Sammy, what is your take?
Yeah, it's very important to be flexible in marketing. And we know consumers make decisions based on the season, the setting, even their mood. So we want to adjust our messaging to reflect that. And I think seasonality is a really big one in the alcohol space. White Claw leans more into refreshment and outdoor occasions during summer months. So think going to the pool or the lake or attending a music festival. But in the winter, we've run programs that focus more on bringing people together and creating meaningful social connection. We also try to be conscious of channel. In the on-premise, we're focusing more on shopper programs, retail display, and digital triggers. But in the on-premise, it's about the occasion and the type of account. So at a high-end hotel, the message and the serve should feel more elevated and intentional. Maybe we have a unique hard seltzer-based cocktail or elevated serveware. But at a sports bar, it's about value, fun, and convenience, like bucket deals, flavor variety, and group-friendly formats. So we are not taking a one-size-fits-all approach. We are constantly asking ourselves, what is the right occasion? What is the mindset? And how can our brands show up in a way that feels right in that moment?
Yeah, right. With how picky and fluid today's consumers are, this is absolutely the way to break through. And talking to a lot of the spirits brands that are probably on the line right now, one of the things I would also say is that even if you just have a single hero SKU that you're leading with and not necessarily a portfolio of different options, it's still about meeting that consumer where they are and showing them how to use your product in different occasions via various cocktails, various social moments. There's different ways to flex so that they're still engaging and thinking of how that plugs into each of those moments throughout their day. Sammy, I would love to see, though, how do all these strategies come together for Mark Anthony Brands? Could you tell us a little bit more about the next slide?
Yeah, sure. So this was a case study with Surge. It was really about combining relevant creative with thoughtful timing. White Claw Surge is our higher ABV seltzer. It's 8% alcohol, bold flavors, and it's made for higher energy occasions. And it's one way that we've expanded our portfolio to deliver an even stronger experience while still keeping that White Claw personality. So for this program, we wanted to make an impression during the moments when people are thinking about grabbing something bold like Surge. We focused on rich media display ads that ran during key windows like party prep, after dinner hours, and weekend moments. And these are times when people are more relaxed, more open to exploring, and more likely to take action. The results were really strong. We saw nearly 2 million in attributable sales for Surge, but even more exciting was the broader lift, over 13 million in attributed sales across the entire White Claw portfolio. That kind of halo effect shows how a focused campaign can inspire category level movement when it's done right. Targeted media doesn't only drive awareness, it can drive actual buying behavior. And because we leaned into the right message and the right placement, we didn't just sell more Surge, we sold more of the whole brand.
That's really cool. I really think this demonstrates the power of having a portfolio that suits the needs of different consumers, but yet speaking to them individually about what their own kind of needs are. And with respect with needs and preferences, $13 million in sales across White Claw products when you're really only showcasing Surge here. I just think that's awesome to think about. So, Sammy, thank you so much again. Really appreciate all your thoughts and insights today. I think now is a great time to wrap this all up with a few key takeaways before we jump into some of the questions that I've seen popping up.
Great.
All right. So if there's one thing I'd emphasize before we head into Q&A, it's this. Success in this category does not come from doing more, do less. It comes from doing what matters most with intention. First, flexibility is everything. Today's shoppers are moving across ABV levels. They're moving across occasions in their day. They're moving across formats, and they're all digitally engaged. So whether you're selling zero proof, low ABV, or full strength, meet them with messaging that feels relevant to them in that moment, not just pushing what's in your pipeline. Second, reach does not equal results. We've seen that showing up everywhere doesn't guarantee anything. In fact, overexposure can really hurt you. So the brands that win are the ones who are going to show up well with smart targeting, great creative, and real-time application to consumers. Third, context drives conversion. A weekday dinner, a summer barbecue, a holiday get-together, those are all different emotional and behavioral states for your end consumer. If your media and your offers reflect that nuance, I really think that you're going to win more often than not. And finally, because I know that the adult beverage space comes with a lot of extra layers, 40,000 laws on a state-by-state basis. At Inmar, we have focused a lot of energy to make it easy to do this at scale, with age gating, rules, retail, state-level restrictions. So I think as supplier partners, it's really important to look for partners in this ecosystem that can do this all at scale, so you don't have to slow down your activation as you think about going in multiple different directions. And that's Inmar, but that's also a number of other providers that are in the space. So that means that you can scale smarter, you can scale faster, you can scale more confidently, and still navigate this complex landscape. So I think just like distilling it down to a single big theme here, be flexible, be strategic, and most of all, be relevant to the shopper in the moment that they're making their decision. With that, let's head over to Q&A. Thank you so much.
Absolutely. Thank you all. So I would like to thank David, Bill, and Sammy for talking all about that. We have a pretty active question list coming in, so I'm going to get right to it. Bill, I think you're going to be my main target for this one. It looks like in the data sets you were talking about, you had sort of 1,200 to 1,500 respondents. Do you have the ability to sort of dig down and look into salary ranges or stores that people are typically shopping at to find this sort of material?
I do. Depending on the survey, because I pulled from a variety of things, but in general, we are capturing things like gender and race, household style, you know, whether people have children in the household or not, and household income, and certainly things like that, and obviously the generations and ages. So yes, we can sometimes filter, and in some cases can also filter by the type of product that they purchase. So whether that was beer, wine, or spirits and things like that. It doesn't necessarily mean that I have questions specific to some of those things, right? So I can filter based on what people told us they purchased, but I might not have specific questions then about beer or wine in these particular surveys, but we run different things throughout the year. So yes, I do have ways to slice and dice this depending on what you want to see and what which survey we're talking about. Definitely.
Amazing. And then also, I know we've been seeing people talk about price, especially as it relates to tariffs and everything we got going on. I guess the question that I have here is price the complete king right now, or are customers still seeing sort of brand loyalty as we have had for, decades before? I guess we'll start this one with Bill.
Yeah, if that was directed to me, I mean, it varies a lot, and that varies by, the product category and price range and all of that. But I mean, we've seen now for quite a few years this erosion of loyalty across brands, across retailers. I mean, today most shoppers, for example, say that they visit 2 or more stores a week, as opposed to having the regular predominant grocery store where they go to buy their stuff because they're realizing, oh, I can get certain categories cheaper over here, or I can get something cheaper over there. So they're now making it more intentional to find the price and get the best price by making multiple grocery shopping trips a week to multiple retailers. And the same thing is in a lot of that data that I showed. A lot of people are trading down and they're looking for a better price. I think that what you're asking there, is it loyalty or is it price, is really going to vary a lot by individuals, and there's a lot of factors there. But loyalty is definitely a lot more fragile today than it was even just a couple of years ago. But complex question for sure.
Of course.
I'd love to jump in on the topic of loyalty, if that's all right.
Yeah, please.
And I think we've seen what loyalty means change so much in the adult beverage space. In the seltzer space alone, it's become increasingly crowded. So there were like 39 brands in 2018 to over 370 last year. And with this rise of competition, White Claw still leads the category. It has 58% total seltzer volume share because we're continuing to stay relevant. So consumers, yes, they're more curious and experimental than ever, but they're often returning to brands that they trust. It's not about being the only choice. It's about being a reliable choice at a range of occasions. And consumers might want to rotate between their brands, but the ones that they return to time and time again are the ones that deliver quality and align with their lifestyle. So really what sets us apart is that we don't expect to win every single occasion, but by staying connected with our consumers and showing up in ways that matter, that's how we can lead the category and drive loyalty over a longer period of time.
Absolutely. And so I guess also similar to that, as we talk about loyalty and returning customers, have you found that when you're doing some of this marketing and discounting programming, that is there any sort of back end tracking of reviews or anything that people are doing to sort of prove or show trends in the loyalty and returning customer space?
Yeah, that's a great question. And we've definitely wanted to build out our loyalty platforms internally. We have one platform called Shore Club, where consumers can stay up to date with White Claw events and White Claw offerings. And so this is a great way to keep a connected experience for those who are diehard White Claw fans. But I think where incentives really come into play is meeting consumers where they are. So if they are a little bit more price sensitive because of macroeconomic changes, we're wanting to lean in and establish trust with them, knowing that White Claw is always there to have your back, even amidst this sea of offerings. So I think it's twofold. It's establishing that loyalty through our marketing and our tactics, but also building a robust program internally for those diehard fans.
Amazing. Now, David, I think this one might be your area of expertise, but you mentioned a second ago talking about beverage alcohol is an incredibly regulated industry with differences in all sorts of different states. Have you found anything in particular, or is there anything that you guys have in your experience on various states that have strict regulations on alcohol coupons and promotions, and how you have sort of worked within those regulations as you guys sort of promote brand loyalty and trying new products?
Ross, that's the toughest question. No, I'm just kidding. Thank you so much. So, within the United States, the ability to do incentives like instantly redeemable coupons, you got between 12 and 16 states, depending on your beverage type. With rebates, it extends to 40. And then there's states like Texas, Indiana, North Carolina, Utah that are extremely hard to address with incentives. I think it kind of goes back to the discussion we had about the shopper journey and each of the individual, components that are part of that. So within a state like Texas, where it's explicitly illegal for a manufacturer to give a price adjustment to a retailer of really any sort, thinking of creative strategies, whether that is loyalty through merchandising, so having a loyalty program through merchandise or having a sweepstakes, something that's not tied to the retailer, not tied to a direct cash value exchange, but also thinking about targeted media as part of their shopper journey. So I think that the real kind of way to impact this while staying abreast of laws and regulations is to think about the different levers and tactics that you can pull, not just incentives in certain states, not just media in others, but the matrix kind of go-to-market approach that you need to do this at scale, still addressing harder to reach places, control states, et cetera.
Amazing. Sorry for giving you the tough question. Let's see. So we have a question here that, as we were talking about, sort of working the digital advertising into the shopping process and various control states. Again, there's been a lot of discussion about physical retail. Have you guys had any notable differences when we talk about e-commerce involvement, whether that's a sort of delivery service or an online platform as opposed to the physical retail list? I suppose, I don't know, I guess, David, maybe that might be for you.
So just in terms of the best way to take advantage of e-commerce, so there's a couple thoughts there. There are retailers now that are offering specific programs for you to participate in e-commerce only digital incentives on their platforms. I think of the Krogers and the Abscos of the world, where they're really trying to increase digital penetration amongst their consumer. And so you can lean into those sorts of programs. I think also a lot about, lower funnel media in terms of being more intent driven, being more conversion based, to actually direct them to add to cart experiences, where multiple retailers are listed on a single page, and has kind of, the branding to try to drive them in the direction that you want to. So some of those tactics, but Sammy, be curious about how you're thinking about it.
Yeah, I was going to echo similar things to what you had said. One piece I might throw in there is when we think about the adult beverage space, as it is highly occasional, that's a great way to tap into e-commerce and get more precise with those exact moments. So let's say it's the fall football season and we're wanting to tap into the sports watching occasion. We might put together a program with maybe GoPuff that introduces like a football bundle. And so that features our products alongside with some snacks that are relevant to people who are wanting to watch football at home with their friends. So it's really about thinking about those occasions. And with e-commerce, we're able to be a little quicker with it.
Amazing. And I know we're coming up on 2:00 now, so if you guys will allow me, we'll ask one sort of final question, and then I'll let everyone go. I have here, when we talked about sort of that White Claw Surge campaign, where there was one product that was leading a lot of growth with other ones, have you found that there is sort of a notable difference between running a campaign across multiple SKUs or sort of one main targeted hero item sort of drawing everyone else? Maybe Sammy, I don't know if you speak to this, or Bill or David is the best folks for this.
Yeah, I'm happy to touch on this. And I think it all just depends on the campaign and what the messaging is. I think with Surge, the reason it drove so much lift for the wider White Claw brand is because there was recognition around White Claw previously, and Surge was that newer product. So consumers were more likely to purchase them concurrently. But it all depends on the situation. And certainly there are instances where we want to feature the wider lineup, like White Claw Zero Proof alongside White Claw Hard Seltzer, to touch onto that zebra striping occasion where consumers are consuming both alcohol and non-alc beverages and maybe rotating between the two. So it's all dependent, and I think that there's possibility to see strong performance either way, depending on what the goal is.
Amazing.
Yeah, would fully agree with that. I think that you have to make, the marketing fit to the correct segment, and especially for the outcome that you're trying to drive. So cross-portfolio plays for where they make sense, I think, can be of huge impact, but don't ignore that there still are opportunities to prioritize hero brands, hero SKUs in your marketing. It's just about that flexibility that we talked about earlier.
Awesome. Now, it is 2:02, so I'm going to let everyone go who has been sticking around with us, and I appreciate all of you guys. So thank you, Bill, David, and Sammy. For everyone know, this webinar is part of our Ask the Expert series. You can anticipate and ask the expert from Discus on Thursdays at 1 p.m. Eastern throughout the year as we seek to expand our educational offerings for all of our members and for the spirits industry at large. There should be in the chat right now a registration link for a webinar we have in 2 weeks with the fine folks at Bev Valuator, started by John Baudet, which is a beverage valuation service. Again, check distilledspirits.org/events for the latest in our series. If any of you have questions that weren't answered, please feel free to reach out to us, membership@distilledspirits.org. You can reach David at david.pless@inmar.com. It's right here on the screen. Thank you, everyone, for tuning in. Please don't hesitate to reach out. We'll be trying to follow up with as many of you as we can for help you get your questions. And thanks, everybody, for being here. We'll let you go.